Good evening. Welcome back to Vegas October 1 Sounds, the Hunter Chronicles. Tonight, we're continuing where we left off in the previous chapter, and we're going to be extending our understanding of the leaked Valet information, a table of the events in the Valet Logs, and we're going to be expanding that to include various information, including statements from the FIT report, lock interrogation stuff, and various other information. And we're going to present this in a very concise form in a way that will enable people to use it for future research. Now, I too had to create this table for myself because in trying to answer the age-old question of what happened on the 28th and the 1st and the 30th events, which seem to be missing from the leaked Valet logs, I needed all the information that I could muster in one place in a way which would give me a bird's eye view of what was going on and would also allow me to look at the various details both from a timing perspective, from a content perspective, and from an omissions perspective. And that's what this video is all about. So let's get started. As you can see, the little graphic sort of gives us a preview of the kind of things that we're going to be talking about. But as I've just said, you know, in the previous video we compared the MGM videos and the leaked information, and we had at the end of that video questions about what was happening on the 28th and the 1st, why those entries were missing, was there an explanation for it, or was it something that was intentionally left out? And so in this video we'll expand the scope of that examination by inserting, as I just said, FIT report, timeline excerpts, lock interrogation report, and staff testimony for each arrival and departure from the Valet. Now, the scope of this examination does not include the self-park activity. That's in a future video, and it too will have some interesting revelations and add further to the compendium of knowledge regarding all arrivals and departures to and from Mandalay Bay. So, rather than trying to explain every detail of every graph or chart, I'm going to give you two examples, one arrival and one departure. And we start with the arrival. And this is from the 26th, which happens to be the most complete event in the lot. And we see there that the date is in the upper left-hand corner, and just to the right of it we have the event type, which would be arrival. And then we have an excerpt from the leaked Valet report, which gives us the date, the time at which the car arrived, and the time at which the car was parked. And then below that mess is an extract from the FIT report where we're talking about the daily timeline. And this extract is dealing specifically with the arrival time. Oh, sure, I might include a few other things from time to time, but the big question here is, does the FIT report have an entry that describes precisely when the arrival occurred? And as you can see in this particular case, I tried to match the arrival time in the leaked Valet log entry to what's said in the FIT report. And since I used green here, I said that it agreed pretty well between the two. And then over there towards the right side, you'll see that, you know, there's people involved with every arrival and departure. And as I may have explained before, you know, the car comes in, it gets greeted by a person who takes the information from the guest. They don't have to have a room at the hotel to use Valet, but they have to give their first and last name, and, you know, then the attendant or the greeter enters the make and model of the car, the license plate, and all that. And if they happen to have a platinum card or a card which gives them a discount, that information is put in there too. Or lacking the information about discounts, then they get charged at $20 back in 2017. So that's what the greeter does. And almost simultaneously with somebody greeting the car, a luggage handler comes over, and if the guest needs assistance with the luggage, they give them to him. And if the guest wants to use the bellhop service, then the luggage gets loaded onto a cart, and that's what I designate as Bell in that little box there. And finally, there's somebody who takes the luggage up to the room. Now, the bell and the room person could be the same person, but typically they are not. So, and in this case, we have the names and we have testimony for each of those slots. This is quite unusual in the sense that most of the entries don't have anything. And that's a big question. Why don't they? And then down below we have a number which helps me keep track of which event we're on, and the number indicates which line in the leaked Valet log we're talking about. And then of course there's going to be supporting images. The most important, of course, will be a video of the person arriving in Valet, which in this case it's Paddock that we're talking about. Some events have it, some don't. And the other images that are available typically involve elevators, trips, or some other locations in the hotel that will help to refine the time at which this whole thing occurred. And so there's times below each of those images, and if there's 2 times, then of course it was a lengthier video, and if there's 1 time, then it was a still image, which in this example we see that there's actually 2 video clips and 1 still image. And then there's this little special entry down there where I attempt to make a calculation as to what exact time the greeter actually created the record that eventually ended up in the leaked Valet, or into the Valet log. And I do that by watching the video of the arrival and observing the time at which the greeter approaches the car and either talks to the person or takes an image of their VIN or their make and model. And from that then, since we know that this clock there on these videos are not precisely aligned with other clocks, I used a lock interrogation point reference time, and to get that I have to subtract it for this particular camera 1 minute and 5 seconds. And so using all that information, I come up with an estimated time at which the Valet entry log would have been created. In this particular example, it's 22:44:44, and the actual time that was recorded in the Valet log for arrival was 22:45, so that's pretty close. And then finally, there doesn't have to be, but it's actually interesting in that almost all of these arrivals and departures actually have a room event which corresponds very closely in time with the arrival or the departure. And so I extract from my lock interrogation report that record and present it here to support or refine or cause concern in the final thing. Now this is for an arrival. We're going to do the same thing here for a departure. And the format of this stuff will vary slightly as the video continues, because I've already modified the format a little bit since I've recorded this. And so here we have an example of a departure. Now you notice in the previous one we started from the top with the date, but here the starting event is actually the event in the room, so it goes on top, and the date and the leaked Valet end up on the bottom. So there's the date on the bottom, the event type there, which for excuse me, the leaked valet image, which in this case is a departure. It occurred on the 30th, and there's 2 times there. Those are different than the arrival. In this case, we have the first one, which is when the car is requested at the cashier, and the second one is theoretically when the guy retrieving the car arrives in valet, and the vehicle becomes available for the guest to use. And of course, it's a departure. And once again, the area immediately above the date and departure and leaked valet log entry is the corresponding statement from the fit timeline that would be associated with this event. And again, its purpose here is to precisely define when the arrival occurred. And we try to correlate that with all these other pieces of information we have in this. And then once again, in this case, we've got people who should have testified. These are things that law enforcement should have done, but almost 100% they didn't. In other words, when a person checks out, they or uses the valet service on departure, they have to take their ticket and go down to the cashier. So that's one person. That's what I call the cashier. And then the cashier has to ring up somebody to bring the car over. That's what I call the park. Now, if a person actually needed assistance with their luggage, then you'd have to get a bellhop involved too, and perhaps even another luggage person to assist. But since there are none of them, I just left it at the 3 and point out that in this case, since there was no luggage involved, that he probably didn't need a bellhop, but he most certainly had to use a cashier and somebody had to bring the car around, both of which statements are missing. This is event number 4, and there's supporting images, the most important of which, of course, is the video showing the actual guest at the valet, and then once again the originating event, which is the event from the Lock Interrogation Report. All right, now comes the actual table of events, and there'll be a slide just like this for every event. There's a total of 10 events, 5 arrivals, 5 departures. The first one occurred on the 25th. The last occurred on the 4th when the FBI came in and got the vehicle. So here we see the complete package. I don't have to explain each of the pieces. All I have to do now is explain what's on this slide. So for the arrival, which occurred on the 25th, for which there is a valet entry, there is an entry in the valet logs. It says that the arrival time was 16:53 and the parked time is 17:10. There is no entry in the fit timelines describing this arrival. So that's a problem, and it's highlighted in red. However, there is an entry in the fit timelines regarding the bellhop, and it says that at 16:56 there was an interaction with Paddock and the bellhop. The first video down there is the arrival video, and it shows that there was a greeter. It was a female, and that by the time on the video, the car arrived at 16:53, and this video continues on until 16:55. And then I went and located the time at which I saw the first interaction with that female with Paddock and or the car, and I estimate that subtract the minute 5 seconds, and I estimate that the valet arrival entry should have been created at 16:53 and 11, which matches extremely well at the top with 16:53. So I know that I'm on the right track. The second video clip here is Paddock coming into the service elevator area and then entering the service elevator, and that person there has been identified as Jorge Morales, and he does have testimony, and he does take the luggage all the way to the room. So in this case, he's serving as both a bellhop and a room attendant for the luggage. From the best of my investigations, it looks as though Jorge met the cart somewhere near the valet stand there by the front desk. So for the first two people, then, the person who greeted the car and the guy who unloaded the luggage, there's no testimony. So right from the start, the FIT report has problems in credibility because they can't even find the testimony or didn't take the testimony for people who were crucial to the whole process. Now you say, well, what does it matter if we have the testimony from the luggage person? Because there could have been something said by Paddock in their interactions that could have been very revealing. Okay, and then finally, this slide wraps up with the corresponding event in the log interrogation report, where Paddock and Jorge took the luggage up to, and the door was opened by LIR time at 5:02 p.m. And so from this, we could do a bunch of calculations on the times and try to resolve everything, but that's not the purpose of this evening's video, The purpose this evening is to present the information and then do a superficial analysis, and then this can become the basis for both my future research and anybody who wants to use it. So with every arrival, there's a departure. And in this case, the departure, and I'll just let it roll forward until we get to it. Each of these is about 20 seconds long, so that you have plenty of time to look at it. So here's the corresponding departure. Now in this case, Paddock is in his room, and at 9:33 p.m. the door is closed, and the next piece of information we have is an image of him in an elevator at 9:36 p.m. And then from there, he must have made his way down to the beach level. He must have given his ticket to the cashier, and that event occurred at 21:37 by the fact that there is an entry in the valet log that shows the retrieval request being at 21:37, which would have occurred concurrently when the cashier received the ticket. There is no testimony from the cashier or from the person who retrieved the car. Now in this case, it's kind of interesting that we have the retrieval time as 21:38. There's only a minute gap between when it was requested and theoretically when it arrived. It's unclear to me at this point in time exactly when the person who retrieves the car updates the valet log, because that doesn't seem like enough time to do anything, let alone retrieve a car. So what that number really means, and that's why there's a yellow line there, is kind of interesting. But the FIT entry, the timeline, the extract from the FIT timeline says that Paddock from 21:37 to 21:40 had his vehicle retrieved from valet and then left the Mandalay Bay. Okay. It would have taken him more than a minute to load the luggage and close the doors. So you see, there's something a little suspect there, but the times match. So here we can say that for the 21:37 number, it was pulled directly out of the valet log. For the 21:40 numbers, that doesn't match the 21:38. So there must have been another piece of information that was generating the 21:40 number. Probably a video. Why wasn't that video here? And as you can see on the upper right hand corner, I have designated the fact that the departing video is absent. So you see, overall, just from this one slide of the departure, we can quickly see that there's areas where we need to research. We can see areas which are potentially wrong. We can observe that there's things missing. In this case, the the video for the departure, and the 2 pieces of testimony from the cashier and the parking garage retrieval person. So everything's exposed by this little bit of this. Well, not everything, but a great deal of information is exposed on one 20-second slide. So we've covered the first valet entry. As you can see, we're on number 1 in the lower right-hand corner. It had an arrival and a departure. Both had some nature of problems, some more significant than others, depending upon what, of course, you're looking for. And now the second entry will be on the 26th. The 26th is by far the most complete gathering of information for any of the Valet Log entries. So it occurs on the 26th. It's an arrival. The Valet Logs confirm it's on the 26th, and they say that there was an arrival at 22:45, and that number is carried forward into the fit timeline statement of saying from 22:45 to 22:52. So they use both numbers, both from the valet entry. Now, to me, I'm not sure why this jives, because the second number, i.e. 22:52, is for when he parks the car or when the car is parked. And I have no indication here how they determine when the car is parked other than that number, but I know for a fact that in one of the entries it took hours to get the car parked, and so using that second number would be completely inappropriate. So how did they distinguish between when the parking of the car was close to the time that Paddock was there and when it wasn't? So there's a question there. So then we hop down into the images, and you see we have the standard 3 for an arrival that uses the service elevator. We have the video clip for him arriving. We have a video clip for him approaching the service elevator area, and then we have a still image on the 32nd floor when he and the room attendant are exiting the service elevator. And as I said earlier, there is testimony for all 3 of those videos, so that everybody is covered, and this is the most complete one because of that. And in this case, I estimated the valet entry should have been created at 22:44:44, which is 15 seconds difference. So, maybe there's something slightly off there that I need to look at. And then, of course, the final thing is that we have at 10:52 p.m. A card being swiped or proximity to the door. Now, there's a problem there, because you can't have Paddock down, doing the valet thing at 22:52 and the door being open. So to me, the fit report statement is a little misleading, but I don't know how to get into the mind of law enforcement there. To me, the details should have been presented precisely and consistently across all these days, and they weren't. Once again, I'm going to say that you can make it, it's easy to make mistakes, particularly if there's multiple people involved, but there should have been somebody reviewing the whole document to catch these mistakes and correct them. And the fact that there was 2 reports and these things weren't corrected kind of leads me to have doubt about whether some of these mistakes are intentional or whether they're just, screw-ups. Okay, so now we have the arrival. There must be a corresponding departure. Doesn't have to be necessarily on the same day, does it? Because he may not have left that day, at least through valet. And he would have had to leave through valet since the car is now parked in valet. That's the one thing you can say for sure. If the car is parked in valet, you got to pick it up before you can leave. And if you find yourself having a departure from valet, then it must have been parked at an earlier time. So here we go, indeed, the next slide, which is the the matching departure occurs on the next day, the 27th. And so the whole thing starts out with him leaving his room at 7:56 p.m., going down the elevator, and in this case we have a still image of him where the time is estimated, and we can clearly locate this as being at the beach level because the floor in front of the elevators there is different than the floor in front of the elevators at the casino level. And so that's easy to identify. And that says 8 p.m. 8 p.m. So he had 4 minutes from the time the door closed to what this clock is estimated to be to get down to the beach level. And from the beach level, you would, hop around over to the cashier, go over to the cashier, hand the ticket in, and they would create an entry in the Valet Log at 8:01 p.m. and ask somebody to go retrieve the car. And in this case, it actually took a while for the car to be retrieved, 5 minutes, even though we have no testimony from either the cashier or the park. And we have no video of him actually at the valet area waiting for the car. It seems odd to me that in one case we'd have that image, and in one case we wouldn't. So, what gives there. And then finally at the very bottom we have the timeline extracted verbiage that says at 8 p.m. and 03 hours Paddock was seen in the valet area of Mandalay Bay. Well, let's look at that. Is that reasonable? Well, the Valet Log says he was there from 1 after till 6 hours. So, sure, that seems reasonable. And he had 2 rolling suitcases. That's consistent with the image of him coming out of the elevator up there. So that's all good. And then it says that he left the Mandalay Bay at 15 minutes after that. Now we've got a problem, and I mark it in red, because here it says that the car was available to him at 6 minutes after. So that's why the missing video clip of him leaving becomes very, very important, because we can't determine from this 206 number and the 2015 number how long it actually occurred for him to leave Mandalay Bay. So which is wrong? Or on the other side of the coin, which is correct? So you see these small ambiguities and the lack of information raise red flags all over the place and say, why was this departure not treated like the other departure that we just seen, or one of the other departures where we have video of him waiting for the valet car to arrive? I have yet to fathom why each of these is different, but when the errors start adding up, I know that something's wrong, and that's when I start digging deeper. Alright, so now we're going to have the third event, and upcoming will be the arrival for the arrival portion of the third event. Doesn't have to occur on the same day, of course. What day does it occur on? On the 28th. Okay. Well, now this is a good one, because it's an arrival that occurs on the 28th. How do we know this? Because we have a video clip showing him very clearly arriving, and the date on it I believe to be accurate. And just like all other arrivals that involve the service elevator, we have a arrival video, we have the going to the service elevator video, and then we have the still image, him on the 32nd floor. So it fits the pattern. However, there's no entry for this arrival in the leaked valet stuff. And this is the one of the pieces that's still I'm still looking at. Why was there not something in the Valet Log for the 28th? And then I believe in the next video, maybe the one after it, I'm going to go into that in great detail and come up with a guesstimate of what actually happened. So a lot of errors are wrong here. So if we take a look at the timeline verbiage, they get it all wrong. They said that he came in with 2 rolling suitcases. Well, obviously he didn't come in with 2 rolling suitcases. He came in with a cartload. So now you got big questions because they should have had access to these images. Why is the fit entry timeline wrong? Well, let's look at the time. 2042. 2042. Well, that's when he traveled from Mesquite. Okay, fine. 2146 is theoretically when he arrived. So once again, we take a look at the video clip of him arriving and find the time at which him and the valet attendant interacted and subtract out the minute and 5 seconds. We come up with a 2146 and 39 seconds time. So that number up there, 2146 in the fit report, looks to be accurate in terms of when he actually arrived, and that was noted in the valet log. But we don't have a valet log, so where did they get it? Okay, and if there was actually a valet log, why didn't it show up in the leaked information, the leaked valet log stuff? We can't use the old argument that it was in Danley's name as it was on the first, because there's other information in the report which precludes that, and I'll get into it. So well, let's just leave it alone for now. So once again, there's no testimony for any of the interactions with staff for this date. None. Zero. Nada. Why? Okay, and then finally, of course, we have him at the room at approximately 9:53 p.m., which if he arrived at 9:46, okay, that's a reasonable time frame. Looks a little long, but it looks like he had to stand around down there in the service elevator for a minute and a couple minutes in valet, so you got 4 minutes there already, and you got the elevator up time, travel time, down 2 hallways, because the service elevator is 2 hallways away from his room, and yeah, it's entirely feasible. But overall, there's too much information missing here from the official law enforcement report to believe anything about this date that they said. But on the other hand, on the other side of the coin, this 2146 number looks to be accurate. And so you got this conundrum here. Everything's wrong from what they wrote down, but the number for arrival time, or the time of arrival, seems to be very reasonable. And obviously he did arrive because we have all these images. So what's going on here? And I'm going to have to leave it at that because I can't really get into the whole thing right now without a bunch of graphics and explaining it all. So let's move on to the departure pair, because as stated before, these things come in pair: one arrival, one departure. And again, the departure doesn't have to occur on the same day. What will it show us? Will it be better documented than this one? Nope. In fact, it's worse. So there theoretically was a departure on the 30th. When did it occur? Well, according to the fit information down towards the bottom of the page here, it says that 0100 Paddock drove to Mesquite. Well, that must be approximately the time at which he left then, right? Okay. Well, from the lock interrogation report at the top, we have a time of 12:52 a.m. So 52 minutes after midnight, and he left at 1 o'clock in the morning, 8 minutes. That's reasonable. Okay, so, but everything else, the valet log is missing. There's no images of him being down there at valet. There's no images of him in an elevator. There's no images of him anywhere in the casino or in between. There's no testimony from either the cashier or the person who would have retrieved the vehicle. So we cannot confirm that this is a real event. All we have is the word of the fit report and the one event from the lock interrogation report. And so, what gives? Why was this departure so poorly documented or researched or noted? I have no clue. But I have some conjecture. But I'm not prepared to, do those conjectures at this point in time. Okay, so the next thing, this was the third event, so we've only got 2 left, so we're going to be moving on to the 4th event here in about 20 seconds. And while the video is rolling forward, let's think about this. We got a missing log entry for the 28th and the 30th. There's lots of stuff missing, and all we had was a video showing us essentially that there was an arrival. So now on the same day as the departure, we have an arrival. So this is when he's getting back from Mesquite. It's early in the morning. It's just a little bit before 6 a.m. So we have a Valet Log entry. It says the car arrived at 5:57. The fit report says it arrived at 5:56. So I mark it in yellow. What's that really mean? Now, here's the example where it says the car was parked at 10:35. That's almost 5 hours later. So you see, here they couldn't write that from 5:57 to 10:35, he valeted his car, because that wouldn't make sense. So they just left out and just said, okay, it arrived at 5:56. But the valet says 5:57. So why did they put 5:56 there? Good question. I don't know. And then, of course, this 2 is very similar to the valet entries that use the service elevator, only this time we're not using the service elevator. Paddock is actually dragging the bags themselves. So we have the video clip for the arrival. We have a video clip from him walking through center core, and then we have a video clip for him going up in the elevator. And based upon, once again, subtracting 1 minute and 5 seconds from the time at which he interacts with the greeter, for which there is no testimony, I estimate that the valet entry should have been created at 5:57, which agrees with what is actually in their logs. So once again, why did they say 5:56? Don't know. So he didn't have a bell, bellhop or anybody helping him go up to the room. So the only testimony that's missing this time is from the greeter, the person who created the log entries. Now at the bottom here, there's 2 locked interrogation report entries, one for 3 minutes after 6 and one for 12 minutes, because as you'll recall in an earlier video, it took him 2 efforts to make it finally up to the room. The first effort resulted in a complete failure, and the whole thing resulted in 2 sets of new cards, 1 set for each room, a grand total of 4 cards. And the reason I put both entries here is because these video clips cover the time for both. The video clip of him arriving is very close to, and it supports the 6:03 entry or attempt to enter anyway, at 6:03, and then the center core and elevator trips are from the second time that he goes up to the room, in which he actually makes entry at 12 after 6. So that's the arrival. This is except for the missing testimony and the times are slightly off, this is a pretty well documented slide. It's a pretty well documented event. What about the corresponding departure? Let's go see. And this is the 4th event, at least the first part of it. And upcoming will be the departure portion. Okay, so here we have the second half of log entry 4. In this case, it starts out with him leaving the room at 2:43 p.m. Room actually left from room 134. And we have an image of him, a video clip, being in an elevator. And that's at the casino level. So, well, no, I'm not sure that's correct. I may be wrong there. That may be on the 32nd floor. I'll have to go back and recheck that. But anyway, he's in the elevator. He makes his way down to the beach level, hands the ticket to the cashier. Cashier makes an entry that says 14:52, and that the car was retrieved by 15:08. That's a whole lot of time. That's, that's 16 minutes. Is that true? That's what its fit report says, from 14:52 to 15:08. So those numbers are identical to the numbers in the valet entry. Okay, so what does the video say? On the upper right hand side is the actual video clip, and it goes from 14:56 to 15:07, which is 11 minutes. Okay, so we're missing 4 minutes there from the time that he hit the cashier till the time that that video starts, which is interesting. Since it's behind the pillars, I can understand that. So this is entirely possible, but again, we're missing testimony from either the cashier or the guy who retrieved the vehicle. And the fit report statement itself is kind of misleading. It's misleading in the sense that they said from 14:52 to 15:08, he removed his vehicle, which I agree with, and parked in the self-parking garage. No, that's not true. None of these times are related to when he actually entered self-park garage or traveled around to it, from what I can tell. And then complicating the matter, and this is where I bring in just a little bit of the self-park stuff. If you go and look at the self-park stuff, there is no entry in the fit report that says when he entered the self-park garage. So that raises a flag for me. Why isn't there? There should be a precise entry, because the self-park stuff's all automated, and all the logs are very clear. Even though we've never seen any of them, you can tell from the way that they cite the times precisely that there should have been one, but they don't for this one. Why don't they? I don't know. All right. So that's event 4. That only leaves one more event, and half of it is, on the 4th when the FBI took the car. So that only leaves the arrival on and it should be the 1st. But remember, he's got his car parked in self-park at the moment. All right, so here we are, the last full entry. This is an arrival. All right, so what's missing? Well, right off the top, we don't have a valet entry from the leaked Valet Log stuff, but we already know the cause. The fact that it was in Danley's name and the search was done on Paddock's name. Okay, but from the leaked Laura Luma ticket, we can confirm that 12:26 is the time it arrived at Valet. Unfortunately, there is no video clip. Why, I don't know. For him arriving at Valet, there should have been one. There was for most of the other ones, so why are they excluding this one? But fortunately, we have him coming through the revolving door and traipsing across the casino entrance there. And we even have an untimed image of him heading into the center core elevators. And we can say it's the same one because he's wearing the same shirt cap and has the same luggage. And then, of course, the lock interrogation report says that at 12:30. So 12:26 to 12:30, 4 minutes. That was a pretty quick trip. Because he had to unload his luggage, give the keys or whatever. Now the keys were probably already even pull them in to this revolving door, all the way down to the service elevator, right up to the center core elevators, then go up. But 4 minutes is still very doable. And of course, as usual, there's no testimony given for the person who greeted him out in Valet. No testimony there. There's no arrival images. There's no Valet Log entry. So you have to ask yourself, and I'm just going to let this thing roll now through the next slide, what's going on here? Did they have trouble because these entries weren't under Paddock's name, or because there was something strange about them, and therefore their whole research was screwed from the beginning, but that doesn't make any sense because they've got access to everything. And, once you determine that he made it into his room, it's a simple matter of working backwards to find the time frame at which you should be looking for the video. Okay, and of course on the 4th, all we have is the leaked image from Laura Loomer, which shows that the car was removed at 10:32. Nothing else about it. Nothing in the fit, no valet log, nothing. No images, nothing. So that pretty much wraps up all the raw slides in this compendium. Now I'm going to move into a sort of a global perspective look at things. There's a lot of information in all these slides, a lot more than I'm going to be talking about here this evening, but I will be talking about them in the future because you have to get all those times synchronized. You have to work out all the details, make sure it all fits, and there are some pieces missing. You have to explain why they're missing and what was the rationale, and that's a tough job. So if we take all of those events, on the left hand side you see there's a grand total of 5 entries that should have been made into the Valet log, and each of them includes one arrival and 1 departure. Okay, and in the first little thing called Valet log, an X there indicates that there was an excerpt from the fit report. Oh, excuse me, I'm totally wrong about that. The valet log means that we have an entry in the leaked valet images. So that's simple enough. And where there's blank, there is none. The second column is fit, and a green mark there indicates that there was an excerpt from the fit report timeline that specifically identified the arrival time or the departure time. And the E on the third event on the 28th arrival indicates that the time was wrong. The next column, which says A/D vid, tells us that there's an arrival departure video, and as you can see, some are missing. The next column called other vid just tells me whether or not there's supporting videos outside of the arrival or departure video. And then the lock interrogation report. Is there an event in the lock interrogation report? And then these next 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 letters all are just simple mnemonics for the greeter, the bellhop, the parking, the room attendant, the cashier, and the parking. Which, 98% or 95% are blank because there's really only 4 pieces of testimony that occurred. 3 of them occurred on the 26th and 1 occurred on the 25th. And that's all the testimony out of the, let's see, there's 7 times. Out of the 70 pieces of testimony we should have had. It's a pretty big black hole. Now, let's take this and let's highlight a few things very quickly, and just to make some global observations, and we'll call it quits after that pretty much. And the first thing we want to look at is who had a valet log entry. Well, there is 3 that didn't, the 28th, the 30th, and the 1st. We already knew that from prior images, but it's good to repeat it. So those are missing from the leaked valet logs. The next thing shows up is who has statements from the fit report timeline which are either missing or in error. There's only 2, one on the 25th, one on the 28th. And then the next thing will be the next column, which will ask who has missing arrival departure videos. There's 3 videos in green, which means that there's 3 videos missing for departures, and 1 on the 1st, which is an arrival, which is missing. So you see, this is where you begin to ask, if all the other arrivals have video in the valet section, why doesn't the 1st? Makes no sense to me. And so, that coupled with the fact that there's no valet log entry, raises that entry as something possibly not, kosher going on. All right, over to the next column, which is the other vids. who does and does not have other information. There's only one. And then, of course, the next column is the LIR. Oops, nope, I didn't cover the LIR. Well, everybody had a corresponding LIR event. So now we look at who had testimony. And as I said before, there's only 4 pieces of testimony given. Three of those 4 is on the 26th, the one's on the 25th, leaving the vast majority and remainder of all the times it could have been staff testimony collected as either not given or not taken. And that's what the next little blurbs say. Oh yeah, everybody has an LIR event, which is kind of interesting. You know, you look at all this, and you look at all the mistakes that LVMPD did in constructing their fit report, and yet in the LIR, there seems to be an entry that supports just about everything. Wow, that's a bad word. It doesn't support. It augments what LVMPD is saying, to the point where you can kind of fill in the blanks at times. But it's not adequate to say conclusively what's going on. Okay, and then I just circled the parts that are missing for the testimony, just to highlight it. So you see we got a nice little short, sweet summary of what's right and what's wrong with the stuff, but we don't have any details, and some of those details are yet to come. And here I did this for myself. I said, okay, can I tell from what's missing and what's wrong whether or not there are particular dates that need close examination? And yes, you can, and they are the dates we expect: the 28th arrival, the 30 departure, the first arrival. And then, you know, you can ask, you know, which of the others are important to look at. The 25th arrival time isn't specified. You know, the first arrival video is missing. These little things that nag at you. But this just reinforces my belief that there was something very special happening on the 28th and 30th, and perhaps also on the 1st, that led to these large number of errors that may be revealing. You know, you couple this with the fact that the 28th has no testimony whatsoever, but 2 of the people said that on the 29th they both helped Paddock and/or saw him with the woman. And so this is for the 29th. So you look at that and say the 28th doesn't have any testimony, but the 29th does, and the cops threw it out because it couldn't be corroborated. And you begin to start looking through the keyhole, so to speak, at what's going on behind the doors. So what can we say? You know, once again, every time you take a different perspective on the data, a different view of the data, you come up with more questions and answers, and you come up with a better understanding of what's going on. Now, these slides were just chock full of information, chock full. And the only thing left to really fill in the pieces in terms of all arrivals and all departures will be the self-park stuff and a couple of other images, because there are other times when Paddock came in that he did bring luggage that wasn't through valet, but for the most part all the luggage was brought in through valet, and that's, you know, an observation in and of itself. And there's several that we can make like that, and I'll get into that in another video. So anyway, this was a good exercise. This exercise was both revealing, and it forms a sound. It is a sound basis for further research. This approach also highlights areas of the fit report which are very error-prone, 28th and 30th in particular, and exactly why these things occurred, I'm still trying to figure out. And then, of course, there's the lack of supporting testimony, which I don't have the clue. Maybe the cops are holding it back. Maybe they didn't take it because they didn't figure they needed to. Maybe it was so revealing and damning that they couldn't even allude to it. But it's just not right, in my opinion. You can't have 70 plus staff interactions but only show us 4 just for parking, or just from the valet portion of the investigation. And then, of course, then there's a consistent lack of detail. Sometimes you have a video for an arrival, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you state the times one way, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you show an elevator, sometimes you don't. Why not be consistent across the whole thing? It's not going to add tremendously to the size or effort of the research or the investigation. Why leave it out of the report? Because it just creates doubt. When the readers read it, it creates doubt, particularly after MGM. Now, I know MGM was responsible for releasing the videos, and you could ask the same questions of them. Why did they release certain portions and not others? Why did they release all but 1 or 2 of the arrival videos? Makes you wonder. Makes you really wonder. All right, well, that's pretty much it for this video, and we'll catch you in the next one.